In the world of DC villains, everyone always seems to have a sob story. The Joker epitomizes a broken embrace of nihilism, a man who turned a series of traumatic events into a lifelong crusade against sanity. He's the embodiment of tragedy turned outward, a demon driven by the philosophy that life itself is meaningless. Two-Face's arc is a classic fall from grace, a once and sometimes still principled man who succumbed to the darker side of his own nature. His duality physically obvious and deeply rooted all at once. And then there's the Riddler, as seen in Matt Reeves' The Batman, a brilliant but beyond disturbed individual whose sense of justice has been warped into something violent and obsessive. His actions are horrifying, but they stem from a seemingly genuine desperation to expose corruption and apply some sense of meaning to the daily suffering that defines Gotham. These villains, though different in a few meaningful ways, share one thing in common, as most villains do: a past, a life before the thing they are now, a semblance of altitude before the descent. But what if a villain doesn't need a descent? What if there are no justifications, no tragic origins, no twisted philosophies to explain their actions? What if the monster was there all along, shambling in the dark, just waiting for us to notice? HBO's The Penguin, a TV spin-off of The Batman, tells the story of Oswald Cobblepot, a man whose evil doesn't stem from trauma, corruption, or ideology, but from an obsession so deep and warped that it defines his entire existence. Full spoilers ahead for those who haven't seen it. At the start of The Penguin, Oswald Cobblepot is exactly the kind of criminal you'd expect to find in Gotham's underworld. A minor, middle management crook with an inflated ego. A street-level boss with a violent streak and just enough cunning to survive in a city that swallows the weak. To the world around him, Oswald is a joke. A pathetic figure defined by his limp, his sycophantic charm, and his desperate attempts to climb Gotham's criminal hierarchies. The viewer is aware of this from the outset, but we begin our journey with him lacking context. We see glimpses of loyalty, flashes of compassion and idealism, and an apparent love for his mother that might inspire some measure of sympathy, or at least pity. For all his obvious flaws, there are moments where Oswald feels like an underdog worth rooting for. This impression, however, begins to unravel the longer we spend with him. Throughout the series, we're gradually exposed to the true depths of his villainy. What few redeeming qualities he seems to possess at the beginning are not so much stripped away as shown to be illusions. Part of his practiced charisma, or even worse, simple distortions of more insidious traits. Darkness refracted into the illusion of light. Over the course of the first season, we're gradually made increasingly suspicious of these truths, until certain climactic moments where they are outright confirmed. This unraveling travels through three main pathways, which form a character arc which is not so much developmental as it is revelatory. The first is the revelation of his past. From this and our uninterrupted view of his present, we see the second revelation, his dark triad: psychopathy, narcissism, and Machiavellianism, the three core elements that many modern psychologists use to quantify what has been known throughout most of human history as evil. The final revelation, and the most important one, what ties everything together as his central driving force, is his Oedipus complex. For those who aren't familiar with the terms, Machiavellianism is a personality trait characterized by cunning, manipulation, and deception, while an Oedipus complex refers to a psychoanalytic concept in which an individual, typically in their childhood, harbors deep feelings of attachment or even a romantic fixation towards their opposite-sex parent. This video will examine key moments which outline the Penguin's central character arc. We'll begin with a look at the impression of Oswald established in the first few episodes, the moments in the middle which raise the viewer's suspicions, and the moments later on which confirm them. While Gotham's villains are often broken by tragedy, Oswald Cobblepot was never whole to begin with. Unlike Two-Face or the Riddler, there is no flicker of lost nobility or corrupted idealism, only a predator barely hiding in plain sight. At the beginning of The Penguin, Oswald Cobblepot presents himself as a sympathetic underdog. This impression is not accidental, but carefully constructed by the show and by Oswald himself. He's introduced as a scrappy, opportunistic gangster working under Gotham's criminal elite, overshadowed by more powerful figures like Sophia Falcone. His limp, his sycophantic demeanor, and his relentless ambition invite a degree of pity. These traits position him as someone desperate to survive in a world designed to crush the weak. The opening scene of The Penguin culminates in Oswald's murder of the new heir apparent to the Falcone crime family, Alberto Falcone. After Alberto mocks his dreams of being loved and respected, Oswald's anger boils over into a sudden, brutal act of violence. On the surface, this act seems vindicated by Alberto's cruelty and cockiness, casting Oswald as a man pushed too far. But this murder sets the tone for the rest of the series, establishing Oswald's lack of hesitation or remorse in killing. This act exemplifies his psychopathy, revealing his impulsivity and lack of empathy for others. It also sets in motion the chain of events that frame the rest of the season. One of the first illusory glimpses of Oswald's humanity comes with his decision to spare Victor Aguilar instead of disposing of him. Initially, their dynamic begins as purely threatening and coercive, with Oswald using intimidation to secure Victor's loyalty. Over time, however, their relationship evolves into something resembling a genuine bond. This evolution in their dynamic reflects Oswald's Machiavellianism, as his initial coercion turns into a relationship he exploits for personal gain. The first scene between Oswald and his mother, Frances Cobblepot, paints a seemingly tender portrait of a devoted son and an overbearing parent. Oswald's adoration for his mother is clear, but so is her suffocating influence. She's demanding, controlling, and dismissive of anyone who might take her place in Oswald's life. This early interaction sets the stage for understanding the centrality of their bond in Oswald's psyche, as well as the roots of his obsessive need for her approval. Her domineering love becomes both his shield and his prison, shaping his worldview and his relationships. This dependency illustrates his narcissism and gives us our first seemingly innocent glimpse into his Oedipus complex, as his sense of self-worth is entirely tied to her approval. Oswald's capacity for manipulation is most evident in his dealings with Sophia Falcone. Initially introduced as a rehabilitated serial killer and a menacing presence, Sophia carries an air of icy malevolence. Her actions and demeanor suggest a stone-hearted villain, but her vulnerability becomes evident in her interactions with Oswald, where his manipulative nature takes center stage. Early in the series, Oswald feigns remorse for a past betrayal, twisting the truth, invoking pity, and downplaying his own ambition as a way of regaining Sophia's trust. Her suspicions of him, both as an ally and as the potential killer of her brother, seem to gradually soften. This blossoming sense of trust is suddenly shattered when, midway through the season, Sophia and Oswald are cornered by Nadia Moroni and her henchmen. Oswald's role in Alberto's death is revealed, his true nature coming into momentary focus. Faced with the threat of death, Oswald doesn't hesitate to dismiss Sophia as meaningless to him in a desperate attempt to save his own skin. Both a completely shameless continuation of his past betrayal and, ironically, the absolute truth. This moment highlights both Machiavellianism and his psychopathy, showing his emotional detachment and complete lack of hesitation to reverse his rhetoric to manipulate a situation to his advantage. Moments later, Victor saves Oswald's life by using his car as a weapon and rescuing him. Abandoning Sophia to fend for herself, Oswald professes a profound sense of loyalty to Victor, framing their relationship as one of mutual respect and trust. At this point, it seems possible that Victor represents a path to some measure of redemption for Oswald, a path which is explored as the series progresses but culminates in one of its most shockingly disturbing moments. A flashback to Oswald's betrayal of Sophia sheds further light on the dynamic between them. Years earlier, his admission to her father of her meeting with a reporter resulted in her being framed in her father's stead as the hangman, a serial killer that was terrorizing the sex workers in Gotham, followed by a decade of suffering in Arkham Asylum. This revelation casts Sophia in a new light, recontextualizing her as a broken victim rather than the sadistic villain she initially appears to be. Her deepening conflict with Oswald and the juxtaposition between them goes to paint him further as the greater of the two evils. Oswald's brutal murder of Taj and Nadia Maroney further illustrates his sadism and ruthlessness. While Nadia is clearly planning to murder him as well, in a calculated way he burns both of them alive, smiling victoriously, completely unbothered as their screams fill the garage, illustrates his lack of empathy and willingness to go to horrifying lengths to achieve his ends. This moment, while less relevant to the major arcs in the series, is a perfect example of his entire dark triad. It combines psychopathy in his lack of remorse, narcissism in his inflated sense of superiority over his victims, and Machiavellianism in the calculated brutality of his actions. The most disturbing revelation of the series comes late in the season, when it's revealed that Oswald murdered his brothers as a child out of possessiveness for their mother. The flashback to the fratricide plays with the viewer's expectations, as, while they know at this point that his brothers died young, the specific incident which led to their deaths might seem at first like a tragic accident, resulting from an irresponsible game of hide-and-seek. The truth is revealed in a painfully gradual sequence, as literal hours pass while Oswald is completely aware of his brother's confinement underground. Visibly undisturbed as the streets of Gotham flood, imagery evoking the predicament interspersed with glimpses of their futile pleas and eventually screams for help taunt the viewer, while young Oswald happily enjoys the time alone with his mother, lined toward the whole time that they went to a movie and will come home soon. Where the Joker thrives on chaotic displays of violence, Oswald's cruelty is casual and quiet. The calm indifference with which he waits for his brothers to drown is far more unsettling than a maniacal laugh. This act of violence, committed long before his rise in Gotham's underworld, underscores both his dark triad and the depth of his pathological obsession with Francis. The flashbacks to him and his mother in this episode all but confirm his Oedipus complex. Even the more light-hearted scenes between them are undeniably weird and uncomfortable to watch. Still, it's plausible to see this as a childhood obsession carrying subconsciously into adulthood, rather than what it's eventually revealed as. Later on, in Sophia's clutches, his willingness to let his mother be violently mutilated, rather than admit to his fratricide and risk losing her love, further exemplifies the twisted nature of their relationship. In this moment, it becomes clear that her approval and the validation it gives him is more important to him than her physical well-being. This willingness to sacrifice her safety highlights his narcissism, as even the one person he seems to value comes second to his own ego. The final devastating blow to any illusion of Oswald's capacity for redemption comes with the sudden and remorseless murder of Victor. After Victor professes his loyalty and calls Oswald family, Oswald kills him without hesitation, strangling the life out of the only friend he has in the world. This act reveals a new depth of selfishness and ambition, as Oswald has come to view any personal attachment as a weakness standing in the way of his thirst for power. What once appeared as a genuine bond is reframed as just another weaponizing of loyalty, a value which, like all others, ultimately means nothing to him compared to the power and validation he craves. It serves as the ultimate punctuation mark of his dark triad, an act of absolute evil that disabuses the viewer of any remaining notion of Oswald's humanity. Where the Joker uses betrayal as a means to sow chaos and Two-Face leaves loyalty to the whims of a coin, Oswald's treachery is precise and calculating. It isn't chance or madness, it's faithlessness in its coldest, most unfathomably selfish form. The last and most important revelation comes in the season's closing moments, with Oswald dancing in his new penthouse with his prostitute-slash-girlfriend Eve, who is explicitly dressed up as and pretending to be his mother. What could previously be dismissed as suspicion or downplayed as a subconscious obsession is finally and unequivocally confirmed. The season builds this revelation through a series of increasingly disturbing interactions, each one chipping away at any lingering illusions of innocence until the truth becomes inescapable. The Penguin is in love with his own mother, not figuratively, not subconsciously, but knowingly and shamelessly, sexually and obsessively, possessively, and romantically, completely in love with her. A twisted affection which has motivated his every action from early childhood, and only deepened and evolved with age. At this point in the viewer's education on the man-shaped monster that is Oswald Cobb, this doesn't breach any new depths of true villainy, and it definitely shouldn't come as a complete shock. But it does serve as the final, terrible piece of the puzzle. A truth so wretched and vile that it somehow successfully puts into context a human being so inhuman, the most emotionless professional psychologist would struggle not to call him pure evil. The Joker would dance on the ashes of the world, but Oswald dances only for himself. The fate of the world and all the people in it not bothering him for a moment. Shambling back and forth on his bad leg, a sex worker dressed as his own mother whispering sweet nothings into his ear. His evil is singular and consuming, as ugly and twisted as the toes on his right foot. Oswald Cobblepot's arc in The Penguin is a masterclass in creating a terrifying villain, not as a story of corruption or trauma, but as an unmasking of the monster that was always there. The time we spend watching him strips away every aspect of his facade, leaving only the raw, unfiltered truth of what he is. In the end, Oswald isn't a man corrupted by Gotham's underworld or broken by circumstance. He's a man who embodies evil in its purest, most unapologetic form. This is the story of a man who didn't need to fall from grace to become the creature he is, only the time and space to show us what he always was. It's a lesson in what humans are capable of that feels timeless and disturbingly real. A reminder that sometimes what we think we see is exactly what we're looking at. Sometimes our instincts tell us something about a person that the rational, empathetic parts of our brain can't explain. Sometimes villains are born, not made. But even if there's no such thing as a person born bad, the Penguin's the closest thing I've seen in a very long time. I hope you enjoyed hearing my thoughts about this series. I watch a lot of film and TV, and I plan to make more, so if you like this video and want to see another one, please leave a like and subscribe. But more than either of those things, I want to hear what you think. Did I get it wrong? Is there something that I'm missing? Is there a moment I could have mentioned that didn't make it into the analysis, or a different angle I could have explored? Let me know in the comments. If there's one thing I love more than analyzing movies and TV shows, it's hearing a point that changes my perspective on them. Welcome to Cinema Analysis. I'm hoping this is the start of a long journey. Thanks for watching and have a wonderful day.